Welcome to the Dynasty Deep Dive, where we go beyond the surface and into depths unknown. My guest is so special that we just threw out the intro video. We're getting straight into the meat and potatoes. We have the one and only Jax Falcone from the Undroppables. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, and I'm glad to help you out with the show. It sounds like we're having a lot of fun today, so I'm ready.
Yeah, man. I mean, you're the star, and like I was telling you before the show started, like I like to use my show as to be a little bit selfish and think about and dig deeper into the minds of some of my favorite fantasy analysts and people who put really good work together. And one of my favorite things that you do is your like anatomy of a dynasty series. So you've done it
Yes.
for quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, and you guys can find all of those on his X page at Dino Game Theory. And we're going to be doing what this show's all about. We're going to be taking a deeper dive into those exercises. So, Jax, I know you've been doing them a few years, but for the people who aren't familiar, just tell us a little bit more about this exercise, why you do it, and maybe what's your biggest takeaway or realization from having completed it.
Yeah. So the anatomy series started when I think it was like 2020, 2019, something like that. And back then on Twitter, there was a lot of analytics based analysts who would do a lot of stuff. They'd be like the R squared of receptions to receptions per target, but and you'd be like, I don't know what any of that means. I don't. Maybe some geeks did. So I kind of understood what they were saying, but then I thought, I bet you the masses doesn't like this, but there's probably value in the analytics. So I thought, what better way than to try and dumb down the analytics, basically making a dynasty or fantasy football analytics for dummies, and I'm the dummy, so I'm perfect to do this. So it was great. It was basically just taking all these sort of characteristics of the best dynasty assets and what do they have in common, and just using very, very surface level analytics. Nothing where I'm trying to proclaim I'm some big smart analytics guy, but people loved it because it really took and boiled down the essence of what we're after. And it was a lot of fun to do. I can tell you that. I still kind of keep it the same. I've thought about really tweaking it in a lot of different ways, but I'm like, I don't know, man. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Let's just have fun with it. It is supposed to be fun. It's not supposed to be super highbrow. It is designed to be fun, but it's also useful. I think people do use it. They go, hey, man, every year I look for that. I like to see what it looks like, and it's just a better way to understand what the optimal prospect looks like. And then to also identify, sort of the red flags. Hey, how does this guy not fit, a prospect coming from college? How does he not fit into the box of an elite, whatever it might be, wide receiver, running back, or whatever, and to at least identify that and say, hey, this is an older prospect, and most of these guys are drafted younger or whatever. He's not fast enough, or speed doesn't matter for this position, or how, whatever. And breaking it down is just a lot of fun.
Yeah, and for me, that's how I use it, right? Is like, it seems kind of rare that a prospect's going to check every single box that you
Bingo.
kind of put as your thresholds, but you can kind of use it as a gut check of like, all right, these guys are checking more boxes than not. Like they warrant some serious attention. Or there's a guy who's super hyped up, but is missing a majority of the thresholds that we see. Those key top dynasty assets they do have. And so, to not bury the lead anymore, maybe I'll just quickly pull it up and I put together some graphics we'll switch to after this, but strongly encourage everybody to check out Jax's X page. A lot of fun on there. And again, he just breaks it down by saying like, hey, here's the data set, right? Here are the top 12. This is quarterbacks, for example. Then he breaks down, in this case, where they're drafted, the commonalities in size, weight, career pass attempts, completion percentage, and like I'm scrolling through, but this is a deep dive here. And I love kind of, here's what you get at the end of it is a summary of like, okay, we have boiled down that out of that data set in general, these are the thresholds that we're looking for. And I mean, for me, this is all pretty like you would assume, right? But these are tough thresholds, as I just mentioned, for like nobody is going to check almost every single one of these boxes. And there's guys like Josh Allen who are just complete outliers, right? From the completion percentage instance, for example. So I kind of teed this up where we would start with wide receivers, but since we're looking at quarterbacks and I'm thinking about it, let's talk about the QBs that fall outside of those key thresholds that we're looking at on the screen. And when you're aiming for upside QBs who fall outside of those thresholds, my question for you is, like, would you rather target a proficient passer who doesn't check the rushing boxes, or a solid runner who struggles as a passer?
I will start by saying quarterback is the most mercurial position to try and evaluate in any sort of way. So when we talk about quarterback specifically, um, it's a little bit difficult. I like to look at, when we're looking at the quarterback position, I like to look at, really some of the efficiency stats, yards per attempt, completion percentage. I know those are kind of surface stats, but a lot of times they tell the story almost more. So I think your question was, am I looking for, so like Anthony Richardson's kind of the case in point. Like we looked at Anthony Richardson and we said early on, it's like, dude, he hits none of these boxes. He's a complete outlier. And then he gets steamed up, top 5 draft capital. He's got the rushing upside. He's got this huge ceiling, but we knew we had a super risky player. And that's why we weren't overexposed to him. We did have to pay attention to it, because if he hits like a Josh Allen did, coming with a similar profile, then you have to, you're going to hit lightning in a bottle. You're going to hit a real home run. But we see those profiles fail more than we see them succeed, whether it be Malik Willis, who didn't get the draft capital, but just to sort of paint pictures. Even a guy like Justin Fields, he hit more boxes certainly than did Josh Allen and Anthony Richardson. But I think you start to see my point that sometimes swinging for those outliers will miss more than it will hit.
Yeah, Anthony Richardson was like the biggest woofs thing for me in my fantasy lifetime, because I'm a big UF fan. And so it was like watching him share the field with Emory Jones, who everybody agreed, like, Emory Jones is a bad quarterback who's not going to be an NFL player. And it's like, if he couldn't supplant him in college, like, I was very timid when I saw him get selected 4th overall, and he was basically a full fade for me from the jump. And it just boils down to your point, like some of those thresholds with accuracy, but then, the style of play is also pretty rough, right? Like a very physical guy, and that's kind of shown up. I think that's been the biggest downfall in his career. So
Anthony Richardson missed another key metric on here, which is college attempts. We've seen a lot of low college attempt players fail, Mitch Trubisky, etc. Right? So, even the high draft capital guys that didn't have enough college attempts were scary propositions. Trey Lance. So Trey Lance, Mitch Trubisky, Anthony Richardson. We've seen the low attempt college players fail more often than not. Again, Josh Allen is the lowest attempt player on this list. So really he is an outlier, as you point out. But, we see these players, these elite assets, tend to play a bit in college. So, we're looking at these things and saying, hey man, the data is what it is. I can't make this shit up,
Yeah, I got to go back on one of the things that you posted, because it was about career pass attempts. I'm going to share the screen right now. This one, total career pass attempts in college, more than 1,500. One person. That's got to be Bo Nix, right?
That is Bo Nix. Yes,
Yeah.
that's Bo Nix. 1,936 attempts. Holy smokes. Yeah. Crazy.
Wild.
But yeah, you look at it right around 1,000. It's like 1,000, 1,400, 1,300, 1,000, 900, 800, 1,200, 900, 1,000, 1,900, 1,100. So yeah, just getting into that 800-900 range starts to make you, have enough college attempts where you can say, all right, you've shown that you can do it over the long period of time. Jaden Daniels, also of course, was a high college attempt guy. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that's one of the, to your point, like evaluating quarterbacks is a total crapshoot, it seems like. But there seems to be one thing that's starting to stick, and it is that college experience, the more college experience they have, then you combine that with something like 1st-round draft capital, you can start to feel a bit more comfortable, right?
Yes, you just start to piece the boxes together. It doesn't mean that a guy who started a lot of games is automatically good. That's ridiculous. It's more to say that, hey, this guy didn't. So is this a red flag? It probably is.
Right. So now it's to the fun part of the graphics that I put together for this.
Yes.
I'm going to pull up. This one gave me a chuckle. I just Googled like building the perfect quarterback, and some Niners fan clearly put this together. I love the around his crotchal region. It says manhood of Brock Purdy as well. Like everything Brock Purdy makes the perfect quarterback, right? But
Exactly. Yes.
jokes aside, that's a guy who, didn't hit, I'm sure, all of these thresholds or many of them, but to your point, he did play a lot of college football and is a solid NFL quarterback. So
Yeah, I would. I don't have his in front of me right now, but I would venture to guess. Look, he was a Devi darling. I remember when he was basically a freshman, he was a highly touted player. So there's something to be said for his sort of, you know, the his profile going into college. And then I think they just kind of, it's a little bit like Bo Nix. Bo Nix and Purdy are similar in that way, where they were really highly touted players that kind of got, I don't know, they just got lost in the shuffle as things went by because they're not prolific. They're not these like big armed, fast guys. They're not a scout's dream. So these guys get pushed aside, but really at the quarterback position, the traits don't do it. Now, if you have traits on top of it all, well, then that's superstardom. But traits don't get it done, as evidenced by Anthony Richardson.
yeah. So before we move off quarterbacks, give me your dynasty QB1.
Jaden
Jaden
Daniels for
Daniels.
sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I love Lamar too. I mean, Lamar's a league winner. He's my favorite NFL player, Lamar Jackson. I'm a Patriots fan, but Lamar Jackson's just the
Yeah.
GOAT. But I think at this point, Jaden's young enough. I mean, he's got enough of an age gap over both Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson to warrant, 101 overall in a super flex league for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, I am a huge Lamar fan too. I'm not a Ravens fan, but I was a Louisville fan growing up. So like, been rooting for him every
Yeah.
step of the way, and it's cool to see him continue to develop as a passer. So, um, let's go into. I think personally, this is the second toughest position for me to evaluate, and that's wide receivers. Like because I think to your point, when you get into the analytics stew, it's like yards per team pass attempt, yards per route run, right? This is where there's a lot of advanced metrics, and to the point where you can almost like analysis by paralysis. So, one of the things that's interesting is like I have the key thresholds that you've gathered from the top 16 wide receivers in Dynasty and kind of backed into what their common college production looked like, and that's up on the screen here. But one of the things that I think a lot of people will, make excuses for the guys who don't hit some of these thresholds is like, let's just throw out Matthew Golden, for example. He's not going to hit many of these, right? Because just didn't have the production. People will probably point fingers to like Quinn Ewers, who honestly is, I don't even think, was the worst quarterback in college. Like I think there were wide receiver prospects who had better careers and worse quarterback play.
Exactly.
But so I say that because like, are you sympathetic on QB play when you're looking at it through this lens? Do you factor for that at all when you're like looking at a guy who doesn't hit these thresholds, but you think, oh, well, he also played in like an Iowa style college offense or Michigan where they just didn't pass a lot. So some of these metrics are harder to hit.
A little bit, but I think greatness shows through regardless. So basically, no. I will say that we have also now added the wide receiver model that we have, which has been very, very solid.
Yeah.
Our UN score wide receiver model, which has some other, contested catch stuff and some EPA stuff. And there's other things that we're putting into that model that help us sort of, come up with a better model. This is not a model that I've got. This is an identifier for sure, and a fun tool. But yeah, a lot of the stuff that's here, is in there. Certainly the yards per target. I'm trying to look there. Some of the quarterback rating stuff I really like. You look at like Lad McConkey had just this past year in his rookie year had he was like 7th in the NFL quarterback rating when targeted. And he was a darling in terms of our wide receiver model. Loved him, even though he didn't have the raw production. So sometimes like the model can find these guys a little bit better than even this identifier can. But yeah, I don't think I want to look at college quarterbacks and start to evaluate my prospects by trying to grade on a curve.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. It's funny you brought up Lad McConkey because I'll be honest, like I swung and missed on him. Like I did not, because the problem I had was when I was putting together some of like how I like to grade, I had thresholds of like minimum catches, minimum targets. And I think it was like 35 catches. And it was like he wasn't showing up in my data set
Right.
that I was creating. And I'm like, I get all the like advanced stuff, but to me, he's a little undersized. And I was like, if he was struggling to like put volume together in college because he was missing time, then how's that going to translate to the pros, right? So
Yeah.
I will say that because I'm not afraid to admit when I'm wrong. And like he is clearly a very talented dude and displayed a lot of toughness. He definitely got dinged up his rookie year and played through some injuries. And I do still worry about that. But at the same time, like, dude set a playoff record for rookie wide receiver yards. So you just have to your point, you can't ignore the talent,
So I'll give you an example. Like missed tackles forced per reception, he was one of the best in the class. Now, missed tackles forced per reception probably wouldn't show up in an anatomy because there are different prototypes, and Mike Evans might not do that well in that, but he was a great receiver. It doesn't mean that he can't succeed. So it wouldn't really show up in this, but missed tackles forced per reception is a little sprinkling in the wide receiver model, which helped him, as did the fact that he is actually in college, his quarterback rating when targeted, he has the best of all these guys of Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, all of them. 154, which is basically perfect. So he was just so good when targeted. He was 3.26 yards per route run, his best season. 2.54 for his career. You look at a guy like Lad McConkey, and that's where we talk about Puka Nacua. We found Puka Nacua because of digging deep in these ways and unearthing Puka and Lad McConkey, out of raw numbers, just taking the raw numbers and kind of moving them aside and allowing some of the per target, per route run numbers to speak for their talent. So, this is new for me too, because, I was, the younger you are in this business, the more, or, in fantasy football, just playing, the more you just look at sort of raw numbers. And then you start to say, okay, I need to make sure that I'm considering everything, not just the per route run numbers and just the per target numbers, but all of it. And, you want to be ready to jump on these guys. And then when Lad got the draft capital and, paired with a quarterback and an offense like they've got with Justin Herbert, it's wheels up.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of one of my lessons learned is you have to be willing to assume that these guys can get healthy, right? Like, because Puka is another good example of someone who missed some time in college, got dinged up. That was part of some of the concerns of, I think, what pushed him down a little further in drafts and made him a bit more of a sleeper was just, to your point, the when he was on the field, he was productive, and I think that is something that you really need to take into account. I got two closing questions. One that just popped into my mind is like Trey Harris. Have you done any kind of? I would imagine that he actually does hit a lot of these thresholds you look for in terms of size from a wide receiver. Those pure, like, his yards per route run's insane. This is another guy who dealt with some injuries, so some of those like volume metrics may not be perfect. And then I think he was, he probably took a little longer to break out. I think that's one of the other big things that seems like it carried weight in your wide receiver anatomy was like a young breakout age, right? Being able to put together, what was it, like 500 passing, or let me see, something like, it better than me, but 700 yards, 5 touchdowns, something like that in your freshman.
Doing something before your true freshman or sophomore season, right? Like just doing something, being somebody. I mean, some of these guys are hard to track, but most of the guys did something before they were a junior. I was thinking about with Trey Harris, like, okay, so he's a 5th-year player. He's not an early declare. He didn't exactly get the draft capital. Like, he's right on the edge. He was pick 55 or something like that. So he's right on the edge. It's fine. It's not great. Size is fine. We have stuff in there that, looks at a little bit different. We do look at conference play and, that type of thing in the model, not in the anatomy. I thought about putting in conferences, but, when I started to think about doing that, the conferences are changing so much. I was confused. I didn't seriously. I was like, what conference is what? I'm like, I'm not going to tackle that project.
Yeah.
We know who plays a high level of competition and who doesn't. We don't really need the data on that. You just know it. Jalen Royals didn't, you know what I mean? Right. I mean, even Matthew Golden didn't, and then he did. I mean, a little bit Houston, whatever. So yeah, you look at that stuff. Trey Harris at Louisiana Tech or whatever it was pretty prolific there too. Again, the late sort of not breakout, because he did play well when he was in, his freshman and sophomore season. But, by the time he was really doing what he did, it was 50-year stuff.
Yeah.
But his career yards per route run is the best in the class at, Tez Johnson, I suppose. But, you know what I mean? Again, you can kind of grade on a curve, understand what you're looking at there, and know that it's probably not Tez Johnson. I mean, who knows? we'll reserve hope. But yeah, I mean, he was ahead of Bird and Ibuka and all these guys. So yeah, there's some data points with Trey Harris that are really, really good, and some that make you wonder. And I think that's where he is. I have Trey Harris and Matthew Golden, similar bets, if you will.
Yeah, same here. And I'm looking at your thread here, and you do say like BTJ, Brian Thomas Jr. and Ladd were the two highest breakout ages, and this stat in caps is not a disqualifier, right? So that's another thing to think about is like, again, none of these aren't like ruling with an iron fist. If they don't hit these thresholds, they're out. But it is cool to like bring up a guy like a Jamar Chase and run him through this and be like, yeah, this dude checks like every freaking box you'd want.
Yes.
And it kind of makes like, that's how I take away from it is I'm like, if I'm going to go pay up for an elite asset, like I want to make sure, I want the real life production to be there, but I almost want some of this even like collegiate and that they've been doing this shit since high school. You know what I mean?
Yes. This was what got me to stay strong on CeeDee Lamb after year one, was stuff like that. It's what made me say that Malik Nabers was the wide receiver one in his class pre-draft, pre-rookie draft. So if you were listening to me, you have Malik Nabers over Marvin Harrison Jr. in all your leagues. That's just the way we drafted. That's the way I recommended it. And it was based on this stuff a little bit. It's just like you look at Malik and you go, dude, what exactly is the hole in his game? It's hard for me to define it in any way, like literally in any possible way. Like you can't tell me what he doesn't do well. With Marvin Harrison Jr., we did know what the potential hole in his game was, and it showed in year one as it did with Rome Odunze, which was he's going to line up in one spot and he's going to do a similar route tree every time. He's not necessarily going to be deployed in multiple ways. It's possible that he could get a little pigeonholed as an outside X decoy to some degree. And it's not like he was exactly that, but it didn't come home like Malik Nabers did.
Dude, I remember that last offseason, seeing you tweet that and just thinking like that's spicy. Like not, because everybody was all in on Marvin Harrison.
And I love Marvin Harrison, right?
Yeah. I mean, it was, dude, that class, like the wide receiver class last year is just fantastic. Like, I think someone on a player profile or RC Fisher said like, Marvin Harrison's not even the fifth best receiver in this class. And the funny part is it's like, Ladd, BTJ, Malik Nabers, like shit, if
he was pretty close.
Hits like worthy, like he might be right.
Criticize the hot takes at your own risk. Look, to me, like I remember when I was saying it, I was like, oh, Malik Nabers, wide receiver one. People are like, you looking for clicks or whatever? I'm like, no, what? Like not at all. It's like I'm actually a little bashful with this because I feel like I'm doing it in a way that maybe a across the grain where I'm not going to be, right on this one. But it takes a little bit of history to realize that, hey, no, this is exactly the prototype we're looking for. The anatomy helped me get there. I will say that for sure. And so did the wide receiver model, but they both scored so well in the wide receiver model. It was actually the anatomy a bit that was a tiebreaker in understanding like Malik Nabers was number one in the class in missed tackles forced per reception. Okay. It's like, that's pretty cool. Like once he catches the ball, he's fast. Obviously he was super productive. Like it was like, wait, everything he does well, including once he gets the ball, he's going to just house you, which is a problem. And he did that in the NFL too. Like he's gone. He's a real tough guy to bring down either by catching him because he's so fast or he's got great strength and balance. The size thing, like, we talk about, just look at we say the prototypical size is 6 foot 200. Just go down the list. Jamar Chase, 6 foot 200. Justin Jefferson, 6 foot 200. CeeDee Lamb, 6 foot 200, 6'1", 200.
Right.
Malik Neighbors, 6 foot 200. Like, Amon-Ra, 6 foot 200. Like, just go down. They're all that size. Like, that is the new perfect size. If you go back in time, 25 years ago, it was Michael Irvin, Andre Johnson. It was 6'4". Yeah, 6'4", 6'3", 220 pounds. And why was that? Well, that was because they were able to just muck guys up. You needed to be bigger and stronger and win more contested catches. Now those contested catches are a more inefficient target for the quarterback and the team. They're not looking to put volume to that. That is very, very helpful to an NFL team to be able to go to George Pickens, Marvin Harrison, guys on the outside that can, bail me out. We had single coverage. I had a guy that I could just throw it up to. He's covered. He's open. So that is more of a football thing than it is a fantasy thing. And that's good to understand both for the listeners and for us going forward.
Yeah. Great stuff, man. For homework for the viewers, I would challenge you guys to go to Jax's thread and run Malik Neighbors, Jamar Chase, some of those top end guys through those thresholds just to see that like Jax isn't a total asshole, that like some of these people really like do check almost every single one of these boxes.
Yes.
And it makes you that much more comfortable to plant your flag, right, when they do. And so awesome talking through quarterbacks and wide receivers. Stick around. Right after this, we are going to talk through running backs and tight ends.
It is a damn shame we only get to a handful of rookie drafts every season. After doing all this rookie analysis, you want more bites at the apple. And that's why we have the Fast Draft Origins tournament. You draft 6 rookies, the top 4 into your lineup. It's best ball style, and it's just $5 to win a $5,000 first prize. So if you're passionate about Taj Brooks or RJ Harvey, get on Fast Draft and use your favorite creator's code to get a $50 deposit match. A $50 deposit match to go make thousands of dollars drafting the rookies that you know and love.
Yeah. Origins is a great tournament, and I think this is a great show to watch and then go do some of these drafts with this knowledge in mind, right? So again, for me, I feel like it's a little bit easier to hit on running backs and that these are a little more straightforward, right? But nevertheless, had to put together the graphic. On the left-hand side, you've got Jax's anatomy thresholds for a top 12 dynasty running back. And on the right-hand side, you have a fun little graphic I pulled off Google of like what the perfect running back would look like from a physical traits perspective. So that's kind of how I look at this exercise a bit too, is it's like in your head, you're always thinking of like, what's that perfect player look like in terms of if you could combine this guy's, speed and this guy's vision. And now it's like, okay, that's cool from a physical traits perspective, but what are we looking for from those, statistical thresholds? So one of the ones, I'll just go off the cuff here. I didn't put this on the show sheet, but like one of the ones you have on here that I think is kind of interesting and would love for you to expand on a little is that 30 plus BMI. For a while, I heard of that as like a critical kind of like threshold of like, hey, if they're under a 30, they might not be able to hold up to like bell cow work, right? But now you've got Devon Achane, Bucky Irving, Jahmyr Gibbs, like guys, without even looking, I can guarantee they're under a 30 BMI, right? So like, can you just talk to me a little bit more about why that's stuck in here and why is that still important?
Less and less. It used to be that if you had a player in the anatomy, top 12, top 15, whatever, running backs under 30 BMI, it was a complete outlier. And now you're right. Jahmyr Gibbs, Devon Achane, Kyron Williams, Bucky Irving, Christian McCaffrey, James Cook, all below 30 BMI. Excuse me. So it matters less and less. And I've been thinking about it. And that's kind of part of the reason that we sometimes have the anatomy, is to see that that's changing. One of the cool things too, I do the painstaking job of, if you go to the 2025 anatomy of a running back, in the bottom of it, you'll see a link to 2024. Then at the bottom of 24, you'll see a link to 23 and so forth and so on. So you can actually deep dive all of the, seasons that I've done this and kind of see the way it changes. And, maybe I'll put into a visual at some point like you've done here or whatever, but but seriously, just to see how things change. But if you were to put it into a visual, what you would see is that the size and BMI of the top running backs is coming down. We're seeing that come down. They're smaller backs. Well, why is that? Well, let's face it. I mean, guess who else is getting lighter? The defenders, right? The defenders are getting lighter. We're seeing more coverage players in the box than ever before. We're seeing smaller, lighter, faster linebackers. It's just the game is changing, so for those reasons, you're not getting hit by a 260-pound linebacker or a 230-pound safety. You're getting hit by a 230-pound linebacker and a 185-pound safety. So it's just different. The rules on hitting have been changed. You can't really do what you used to be able to do, although they still do kind of let you tee off on the running backs a bit, but still not quite the same. So there's more two-back opportunities. There's less bell cow. There's more split backfields, more specialists. So for all these reasons, you don't necessarily need to have that one as important as it was. And that's been one of the big things about the anatomy is I didn't want to look back. I wanted to look forward. A lot of people say, well, why do you pick the top 12 dynasty assets? They aren't even the top 12 players. Maybe a player like Alvin Kamara is not in it this year. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
or right. Maybe even Derrick Henry, I don't think is in there, right? It's like,
right.
Dude, they're the two best. It's like, yeah, I get that. I'm trying to look at what's happening to the position, not what happened with the position. Who cares what 5 years ago happened? I want to know what's going to happen next year. And now this has forced us, and I say us, me, and anybody who's sort of in my vortex, Joe Kuvatakis, I'll shout him out, to start to get off of the sizest of the running back position and lean into smaller backs.
Yeah. And I think it almost ties back to what you were saying about wide receivers, right? And it all ties to just the evolution of the game as a whole. It's just becoming more of a less of a thumping game and more of a getting the guys in space with speed and make you miss. And so, Jahmyr Gibbs is a guy who I love is that kind of new age, dynasty kind of cornerstone running back who, he might not be a 25 touches a game guy that you really want to see touch the ball 25. If he's he has before in the past, right? When Monty's out and you're holding your breath a little bit, hey, I kind of miss Monty almost a little bit because he can take those, brutal runs up the middle for 3 yards. Give Gibbs those design touches in space where he can really eat, right? And put up a lot of fantasy points per touch. So
100%.
So speaking of kind of just the position, right? This is something that I think a lot of people, to your point, when you think about the Derrick Henrys and the Alvin Kamaras, the second they're 28, 27 years old, you're looking to move off these running backs just because durability is such a factor, right? And so, is there any part of the anatomy or just your thought process that thinks about factoring in their, heavy usage in college or just their more physical play style as a whole and trying to adjust that, those running backs might not last as long as someone who's not as physical of a player?
I haven't. I suppose I could. I haven't. One of the things I think about as I look down these subsets is you want the reason you want them to be heavier. Well, what do you want? You want opportunity, right? So opportunity is in number one. They're coming out early and they're drafted with purpose. It's they're more likely to get on the field. So I'd rather if you tell me I'm going to get one guy with 300 opportunities and one guy with 150 opportunities, I don't need to know anything else about him. Just give me the guy with 300 opportunities, right? I mean, just period. I don't care who it is. I'm taking the opportunities. Well, the opportunity is sort of baked into some of that. Then I want a guy who can hold up to those opportunities, which is why you want a little bit more BMI. I want a guy who catches passes. Well, how do I know if he's going to be targeted in the pass game as a pro? Well, maybe if he was targeted in the pass game as a collegiate player. I want a player with big time playability. I want a guy who can score touchdowns and take it to the house and make big plays, chunk plays. Even a screen for 22 yards, man, PPR, that's 3.5 points. You know what I mean? Like, that's a big play. So rather than a check down where he gets tackled at the line of scrimmage, right? I play in a lot of first down leagues. Can this guy convert? So you look at all those things. It's like, okay, yards per route run, explosion, speed score. All those things sort of contribute to, hey, this guy can do it. Even, some of the big, I tend to look at some of the big seasons they've had. If they have big touchdown seasons, they were probably dominant. You have a guy who was maybe just a volume play versus a guy who has, scored 25 touchdowns in a season. He's probably good, man. I mean, it's, so when you start stacking some of those things together, you're like, yeah, he caught passes. He was fast. He was drafted early with purpose, and he was dope. It's like, okay, that's a pretty good start. So when you see some of those things, again, identifying players that, his yards per route run was garbage in college, probably a 1-2 down guy, a first and second down player in the NFL. It's going to be hard for him to convince a coach, yeah, I'd never done this before, but I'm the best for sure in the NFL to do it here. You know what I mean? That's a hard sell. And so that's why we look at it. A lot of people say, well, he wasn't asked to catch passes in college. Well, what makes you think he's going to be asked to do it, at this much harder, super intense level? Probably not likely. And that's, the trap we get ourselves into. We fall in love with a guy and then we make excuses for him, ignoring the data right in front of us.
Yeah, great points. One guy comes to mind that I got to pick your brain on, just because like he's kind of a juxtaposition of some of those things, like the size and the opportunity you think is going to be there. The passing prowess wasn't there in college, and that's Caleb Johnson, right? Like, you see him going, he doesn't hit that round 1 or 2 threshold that you're looking for, doesn't hit that sub 4.5 40 you're looking for, doesn't probably hit the 1.5 yards per route run career threshold you're looking for. But you kind of said at the earliest, like, give me the guy who's going to get 250 carries over, right, maybe someone else who's similar draft capital, but not as potentially locked into that type of role that we see for Caleb Johnson. So can you just tell me a little bit where your head's at with him? Is he someone you're targeting? Are you avoiding him based on, him not hitting enough of these kind of thresholds that you're looking for?
I thought he was steamed a little bit, given the stuff that you mentioned, the third round capital, the lack of pass catching upside, and, maybe just not quite a special, specimen, right? So for those reasons, I didn't get a ton of him. I was certainly drafting Emeka Egbuka over Caleb Johnson. Maybe that turns out to be maybe that turns out to be a mistake. I don't know. It doesn't feel like a mistake. I feel very, very happy having a, long time 10-year target earner than a potential maybe at running back. I can find a potential maybe anywhere. I do think, though, if you're just asking me as a football fan, dude, Caleb Johnson going from the black and gold in Iowa and now putting on, he just looks like a Steeler. I mean, I know it's probably just that sort of mental, recoil of just seeing him in that color, but he feels like a fit, man. And he's a lot like Najee Harris, a bigger body guy who can just take a lot of carries. He's not as good a receiver as Najee was as a prospect.
Right.
We'll see if he can do that. Again, that is one of those Iowa situations. They just don't throw the ball at all.
Right.
Never mind to the running backs. They throw it to nobody.
Right.
So but even still, his yards per route run, not good. So if he was out there, in a pattern, so to speak, which is a little bit ambiguous for a running back, sometimes it could just be they flared out. That's a route run potentially. Sure. Did he get targeted? No. But I just think that, sometimes those guys, if they have that dynamism, they're given the ball in those situations, no matter.
Exactly.
Case in point, JT. JT, everybody thought he wasn't a pass catcher. I said, no. Look at the underlying numbers of him as a pass catcher. He's better than Clyde Edwards-Helaire as a pass catcher. People thought I was freaking crazy. I'm like, dude, Clyde Edwards-Helaire played in an offense that they scored 60 passing touchdowns. He had 1 passing touchdown, receiving touchdown. JT played in an offense that they had like 18. He had 6. It's like, do you see this or no? You guys don't miss this? It's like dude was making gigantic plays in a passing offense that didn't exist. So sometimes you have to look at some of this stuff. And with Caleb, there's a little bit of that, but he still didn't really get home.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you balance like you know, some of what the numbers are going to tell you, and then like the vibes. To your point, you're like,
Vibes are
man, like
solid.
But the
Yeah.
thing that fucks up the vibes with me with Caleb is like Arthur Smith, dude. Like I every time I start to get excited about him, I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? Like I drafted Bijan. I've lived through this nightmare and I'm doing it to myself again. Like I'm
Yeah.
signing up to get hurt. I didn't have the chance. I would have taken Ibuka over him in one of my leagues that like I did leave with Caleb Johnson, but at that point it was like Tyler Warren or Matthew Golden or Caleb Johnson were sort of the three that were on the board. And
Was
I
it a
was
super flex league? Tell me you
no,
didn't pass on Dart.
no, it was
Maybe.
a single QB,
Yeah,
single
okay,
QB.
totally different. Because I
And
mean, if you're feeling funny, you know, I would just say take Dart. You know, I mean, that's the thing is like, you know, Jaden Higgins maybe. I mean, that starts to get too far. I'm okay. I've got a few. I'm in like 22 leagues where I've got a couple of Caleb Johnson shares. And I'm hopeful. I'm just not overly confident.
yeah.
You know, and it's a slow paced Aaron Rodgers offense. There's not a lot of good signs that it's going to be really prolific there. So it's a little bit. I think there's probably going to be a buyback opportunity for him sometime during the season and or even after the season.
Yeah, like I said, it'll take Cordero Patterson, like, you know, stealing one or two goal line carries for
Right, just crush
fantasy
everybody's
managers
soul.
just to
Yeah.
be throwing fits, you know.
Yes. I mean, he's a super young player too. That's the other thing. Like when we look at him versus RJ Harvey, he's like 3 full years younger than RJ
Yeah.
Harvey. Which means like in 3 years, do you think he might be as good as RJ Harvey? And that's not necessarily the way to look at it because of course, then you would just automatically take Caleb. But that's part of the analysis there that yes, he does have some runway to get better. And hopefully, but he's a 3rd round pick too. It's not like he was a 1st round pick or, you know, a 2nd round pick, even where you could say, okay, he's hopefully tethered to a little bit more, you know, opportunity by way of investment.
Yeah. Sorry to go off on a tangent here, but now I'm thinking about it. Like Arthur Smith's dad is like the CEO of FedEx, right?
Yeah.
And so for a while, I was convinced that like Arthur Smith was called up by like the Skull and Bones Club and they were purposefully telling him to make sure that Bijan didn't get enough volume for me to win his rookie year. So that's like where I'm at with Arthur Smith.
Yes. Yeah.
Uh,
He does not need any money. I just know that much for sure. He's not in it for the money. God bless him.
Cool, man. Well, let's close out with tight ends quickly. You know, I was joking with you. I'll throw up the graphic. Like for all these other ones, you could just Google like build the perfect, you know, player, and you've got all these great graphics to choose from. This is the best graphic I could find for building a tight end. You got to assume that's Greg Olson's helmet, Jason Witten's eyes. I think that was like Cameron Brate's hands.
Ooh, love that.
Which I was like, actually, that's pretty good. He had some solid bits. You got the Gronk body. I think that's Jordan Reed's legs.
Yeah.
So that's what the physical would look like. But then, you know, the on the left-hand side, we have kind of the things that you ran through as what the top 6 dynasty tight ends bring to you from a traits perspective. And, you know, I think I'll just say for me, this has been a position where I've had a lot of luck in my drafts because, like, I don't know if you've seen this, like, 2nd round tight ends sometimes just get faded. Like, and even in single QBs, like, I saw Elijah Arroyo go at like the end of a 3rd round.
Yep.
You know, Mason Taylor, all of these guys, Terrence Ferguson, like they're not going to be, you know, a 1st round or an early 2nd round pick for you. So then you're not giving up a ton of you know, fantasy equity to get these guys. But to your point, like the first thing on there is day 1 or 2 draft capital, right? Like, yeah, it's a much higher hit rate when they're a 1st rounder, like tight end, as opposed to a 2nd rounder. But guys like Sam Laporta, like I picked him up in a single QB league in the 3rd round of a rookie draft one year. And I needed a tight end like bad. And I was thinking like, what am I going to do? But I started looking at some of the underlying stuff and I'm like, man, the yards per route run and the yards per team pass attempt, like he was the entire passing offense at Iowa.
Right.
And that's sort of what gets me so excited about a guy like Colston Loveland is like the volume counting metrics aren't necessarily there. But when you take a deeper look, you see that like those numbers are fantastic from a production of the team's passing offense.
Yeah, Colson Loveland's our tight end one,
Nice.
or my tight end one, and I think we got there as a group. Dynasty Underground, Joe Kuvatakis and Travis Seal. Travis Seal was the first one on that boat. Analytically, I got there with him as well. Notice though, day one or day two draft capital, as you point out, not like the quarterback position, which basically says early first round capital. So the capital always matters. Of course, you'd rather have them drafted highly than not highly. Like, that's obvious, but you don't need to see the early first round capital in the tight end. As a matter of fact, in a lot of instances, not even the best one is the first one taken off the board. So, buyer beware. I think a lot of the other metrics are important. For me, one of the ones that I think is sneaky is the 14 plus yards per reception.
Yeah.
Look, I think that if you can't make any big plays in college, why do I think you're going to make big plays in the NFL with much tougher competition? So that one really is interesting. And when you look at it year over year, we see that almost all of the elite performers at the NFL level had a history of big plays at the collegiate level. Matter of fact, Sam Laporta is the only one who falls short of this, really. But like Brock Bowers' career, 14.5. George Kittle, 15.4. Hawkinson, 14.8. Mark Andrews, 15.8. That's their career, yards per reception for their career. When you go to their best season, it's 15.8, 15, 12.6, 14.5, 15.5, 16.7. Like, that's huge numbers. So I want to see a season certainly up there. I want to see a season. That's where Mason Taylor, his best season is 10.9. His yards per reception for his career, 10.1. I don't know, man. That's the Mason Taylor red flag amongst many others, quite frankly. His yards per route run, his best is 1.23. Not good. Like, we're trying to be at over 2.5 for his best. He's at 1.23. So look, Mason Taylor doesn't excite me. A lot of these guys have holes. Colson Loveland doesn't really. He's got that 14.7 best season yards per reception, 2.67 yards per route run best. That clears. 2.22 career yards per route run. That clears. Even Tyler Warren does not have numbers that good. So, yeah, when we look at it, Colson Loveland certainly is that tight end one, and there may not be an elite tight end even in this class whatsoever. So they may be a lot of good players, but maybe not one of these sort of top 6 elite game changers, potentially. If there is, I'd be betting on Colson Loveland. But in a lot of ways, I'll probably just take some shots on, Terrence Ferguson, who's sneaky good in some of these metrics. Not great, by the way.
I was just looking at that. I'm like he checks actually more of these boxes than you'd think. The RAS, I think the size, the 40 time.
Yes.
13.7 yards per reception last year. He led the country in yards after contact. That's
a good one. Yep.
6.0 yards per contact after a catch is on average. That's a tough threshold. So these aren't like, you're not just giving away these things, right? And so that the more you talk through this, the more I'm like, man, I got to go take a second look at him, because whenever McVay trades up and is excited for a guy like he was for Puka. He didn't trade up for Puka, but like, I'll never forget that video of him talking to Les Snead about exactly how he's going to use Puka and that he's going to be a day one guy, and like same energy when he drafted Terrence Ferguson.
Exact.
And kind of same energy when he drafted Jarquez Hunter. So at a certain point, you're like, can I take, I got to take this with a grain of salt. You know what I mean?
Yes.
But
and Sean McVay is a kingmaker. I mean, he's done it over and over and over again. I mean, Cooper Kupp, Triple Crown. What are you, crazy? Like, he's not the greatest wide receiver in the league. He never was.
Right.
Triple Crown. Like, so he's a kingmaker. Kyron Williams, late round draft pick, slow 40, the whole thing. Top 5 finish or whatever, in fantasy. Like, so yeah, he's a kingmaker for sure. And right now, having any part of that offense, I'm in full support.
Awesome, man. Well, this was really fun, really insightful for not only, I'm sure, the viewers, but for me personally. So want to say thanks for hopping on the show.
Of course.
Close us out. Tell us, plug anything. You guys do a lot of great stuff with the undroppables. Anything you want to make sure that the viewers are kind of being directed towards?
Yeah, man. I mean, look, go to the Undroppables on Twitter. You can find just links to everything. We kind of just everything that's happening. You were part of something that I thought was pretty fun, our Uncovered series, which gives creators an opportunity to pod and do video about their favorite football team. Which, look, if you have a favorite football team, go check it out. We have about half the league has a show. Raiders, Cowboys, all that stuff. Just go to your favorite team and more content about your team. And usually a fan with a pulse who knows what the hell's going on, sometimes a pretty awesome analyst or creators doing the show. It's just all different types of people. We don't really have we're not gatekeeping other than we want passion. And so that's really the prerequisite is you got to want to do it. And that's fun. So Uncovered. But the big thing for me right now is I'm doing the Dynasty Underground with Travis Seal and Joe Kuvatakis. That show, man, oh man, if you're missing that show and you're a Dynasty player, you're missing out. That is a lot of fun. It is a whole different type of thing, man. It is super, super fun. 3 distinct differently personalities, and it shows in the way that thing goes down. It is so much fun. Of course, I do Undrafted. That's also, posted and presented on Player Profiler Network.
Yeah, man, you are a juggernaut in the industry. Love the show with you, Joe, and Travis. And again, you guys can find all of Jax's work at Dyno Game Theory on X. Shoot him a follow. If you like this show, give it a like. Comment any questions you have for Jax and I. We'll try and get you some answers. And subscribe to the Player Profiler Now network because you're going to have awesome people like Jax on this page all year long. So thanks for watching, everybody. Good luck in your fantasy leagues.